Hey guys, Levelcap and Luetin here with an episode of On the Level. Today, Luetin and I will be talking about a concept for perk stacking with squad perks in Battlefield 3. Now, we've all been in game before where you join a squad and all of a sudden everybody's running squad ammo. You don't know how it happened, but it's basically non-beneficial to the squad to have any perk stacking. And there's been talk about some interesting perk stacking benefits that you could get. And Luetin, why don't you explain this concept?
Okay, so basically the idea is that if you run with 2 or 3 or 4 people with the same perk, it would give you added benefit in some variety or another. So for example, if 2 people were using ammo, it would give you an extra clip. The idea that perhaps your soldier carries an extra belt which allows you to carry extra clips and stuff, in much in the same way that the grenade perk right now does it. But the more people that you would stack, the more people it would actually give benefit to. So it would have extra effects. So you, for example, if you had 3 people with ammo, maybe you could pick up extra ammo from any other person's player. The danger with this kind of thing is that you run the risk of having certain squads suddenly become vastly overpowered with one specific piece of kit. So say, for example, you had 4 guys all running extra explosives. Well, what would those increases be? They would have to be sort of minimal enough that it didn't completely imbalance the class, but it would have to be enough that it gave you some extra benefit, whether it was a little bit more damage, or perhaps, for example, with the extra explosives, you could carry maybe 1 round of an igloo or something like that, so you carry your extra RPGs, and then so these kind of things, maybe it gives you the ability to slightly multitask a little bit more in game. But there is a huge danger. It would have to be balanced so carefully in order to get it to work, and it's an idea that's been discussed around a little bit for a while now, and it obviously is something that frustrates people in game. And you know, on the other flip side of it, a concept that sort of I was talking about the other week was the idea that if you had 2 people with it, maybe one person, as soon as one person in your squad has it, if the next guy tries to run with that perk, maybe it defaults to them for another one.
Yeah. Well, with the specifics here, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go. I think it initially came about with like people trying to think of ways to prevent perk overlapping. And I really do like the stacking concept. I think there's a lot of ways that you could go about balancing it. You could either just make the basic perk even better, or you could add in interesting little bits, like with the explosive round you were talking about, where you start off by getting more ammunition for your rocket launcher. Well, maybe the next level makes the rockets fly faster, and then maybe the level after that allows you to reload your rocket launcher a little bit faster. So if you decide to go a whole squad of engineers all with explosive perks, all of a sudden you've got some engineers that can fire rockets extremely fast, and you have a lot of them. It could be a lot of fun. There would need to be a bit of care paid to the balance aspect of it, but I definitely think you could do it. And it would add a whole new level of squad strategy, I think, because there isn't really a lot of squad strategy other than like, all right, let's have a medic to keep everyone alive, and then a guy with ammo and some rockets. You know, I mean, it's all kind of just basic squads that can stay alive and kill armor and deal with most situations.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a sideways note to go with this as well. Is something that people have mentioned is that often the problems you get from squad perk stacking tend to come from the fact that people will change class throughout the game depending on what situation they're in, and then their different classes are already set up with different squad perks. So you might start off the game with the correct sort of setup. Everyone's got a different perk because you've just started and you've thought, okay guys, I want this for this map. But then when you're in the heat of battle and there's a tank coming down and you're like, guys, we need engineers, you change out, and of course you forget that your engineer had already got maybe explosives and someone else is carrying that. And then once you're into that situation, maybe the other guy in your squad doesn't want to change out, or maybe you need to stay in, it's all a bit hectic. And I think that's often where these problems can come from, as much as people forgetting to do it. So something that was mentioned was that, for example, every class should be able to, have one perk assigned to it, and it just stays throughout. So say you pick sprint, that will go with all your classes. But anyway, I mean, when we come back to this idea of stacking, though, it allows you a lot more sort of tactical options. The idea that you could choose, okay, maybe 2 guys which have two of the same perk, and then another 2 with another 2. Maybe you get 3 and 1 or whatever. So it is interesting. It would provide a lot of benefit. And I think when you think about the variety of maps and different vehicles on different maps and stuff, there's, it would have a whole other tactical element. And I think it would benefit people who actually spend the time to actually think what they want to take in game. I don't think it would have so much of a negative impact on people just randomly taking stuff. I mean, if people
there's no negative aspect to it. Here's what's great about the concept is if you join a random squad with random people that you're not communicating with at all, you're still going to have just either a random collaboration of perks, or if you overlap, you're going to get some benefits from that. So instead of before where you have redundant perks, now you have extra abilities from that. So there's no negative from that. And then it just allows that extra depth of strategy, which anybody who's playing with friends, like once you've gone this far in a battlefield, you've really explored all the different areas of strategy. It's still a fun game. This just makes it that much more deep. And I could really see this simple element here adding a huge depth of strategy to squad tactics. So it's very simple, but could ultimately be very complex.
It definitely would be. I mean, when you think about the difference and the whole different way that you play out different maps, when you think about a map like Oman, you compare that to a map like Seine Crossing, the whole layout of the maps is so different. One is very urban, very tight, the other is very open, more vehicles, a lot of long-range combat and all this kind of thing. So the way that you would set up your class would be so specific to certain situations, and it really is going to add that benefit, like you say, to the players who really spend the time to think about it and how they want to play out their squad as well, because it's not just a case of taking certain things for certain maps. Some people are going to want to run squads in completely different ways for what role they want to play. Do they want to be the really sort of stealthy flanking squad? Do they want to be the aggressive upfront squad? Are they a very tight defending engineer team and they're going to lay down a lot of mines and be really sort of anti-vehicle based? So it really does give you that focus. And I've said this before, that running a squad on vehicle heavy maps where you're all sort of engineers and you're leaning towards that kind of thing, this would only add to that benefit of having a really organised squad, people dedicated to playing a certain role. And I think that there would be as much counter to it as anything else. I mean, if you have a squad which is really heavy towards engineer, well, it's going to impact them in different ways, because they are not going to have the benefit of different perks that would lead towards more assault based classes and things like that. So when they come up against other classes that are running different perks, they're going to be outclassed. So there's as much balance there, I think, as anything else.
Yeah. No, it's a great idea. And for fun, we decided to come up with our own new squad perks, which actually ended up not being that easy, because we were thinking, what the heck could you add? DICE actually did a really good job of covering most of their bases here. But we did manage to come up with a few. Luetin, what's one of your first squad perks that we could add to the lineup?
Yeah, we'll do. Well, I'll just say really quickly first that we found it so hard because we were talking about it, weren't we? And they're so passive. This is the thing, is that you have to think right now about how the perks and the squads are before people start thinking about what they actually want. It has to be passive enough that it doesn't impact other players too heavily. You don't want a squad specialization that when you take it is going to force other people to have something that they don't want. You also have to be really careful that you don't, a favorite one that people have mentioned is sort of the favorite sort of magnum ammo or flak jacket, which prevents bullet damage, not flak jacket or bullet vest, But when you take those kind of things, it suddenly adds a very kind of literal version of an effect on your player, and it needs to be a more passive effect.
It has to be very subtle. You can't throw a bulletproof vest in there, because then everybody in every squad is going to take that. It's too good. If you can take an extra shot, that's a huge advantage. So they have to be very subtle, very passive.
Okay, so one of my first ones. Now, it's important to remember this first one that I've got here, that it's a slight reduction and also percentage reduction, as Level probably explained slightly better than me, but the idea with it is called Squad Focus. And what it would do is give a slight recoil reduction from your focused operating team. Now, the key to this is that it would only be a small effect, and it would only take the edge off of the worst weapons. So it would not create weapons that were vastly overpowered. What it would be is a percentage reduction. So what we're talking about with the percentage reduction is, for example, if you have a FAMAS with a 0.35 vertical recoil and you have a SCAR L with a 0.2 vertical recoil, the 10% would bring that FAMAS down to 0.31, and it's going to bring the SCAR L down to 0.18. So the reduction for the FAMAS is going to be slightly more than it is for the Scar L, so it's going to have a bigger impact on weapons that have a higher recoil, and for the ones that already have quite low recoil, it's going to have an effect, but that effect is going to be more minimal and it's going to be less noticeable. So hopefully what it would do is give people the opportunity and the inclination to use a wider variety of kit, and maybe give them more versatility to use these pieces of equipment in different situations. But Level, I mean, what do you think about that one? Do you think that's balanced enough? Do you think it would be a good impact? Would you want to have that in the game?
You know, I liked it when we first started talking about it, and then I started having some doubts just because the really pro players out there, or players who get very comfortable with their weapon recoil, might actually not like a recoil reduction if they're very used to how much the weapon pulls. So if you master the pull of a gun when, say, it's kicking back vertically, and you know exactly how much to pull down on your joystick or on your mouse to counter that, somebody all of a sudden joins your squad with that recoil reduction, that could screw you up if you're a good player. I think that's what I don't know. That's a tougher one to deal with. I like the concept, but it's got some issues.
I think it comes back to what we were saying before about how passive do you make them. You know, it's a really difficult one. It almost has to be. It has to provide you with a benefit, but that doesn't impact you in a way that will literally physically change the system that you play with. It's a very, very difficult thing to come up with. What's your first one?
Okay, so this one's kind of basic. It's a lot of other games have stuff like this. Planetside and Call of Duty have things similar to this, but faster weapon switching. Basically, your ability to switch between your primary and secondary weapon, or primary and tertiary, or grenades, or whatever. Just basically quick weapon switching could be very useful for, say, a recon class who needs to switch to a pistol in close quarters. Say you take a shot at somebody up close, you miss it, then you got to switch to your pistol. Well, this kind of perk could improve that weapon switching, say something like 33%, just to give you a bit of an edge. I don't think it would be quite overpowered, but it would be a nice little addition to make squads a little bit more reflex happy.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is with that, you still actually have to have your own reflexes as well. You know, you still need to be quick enough to change it out, even if it's going to be quicker at the same time.
Right.
And I mean, that is quite a literal changeover, like we were just saying. It's not so much of a passive one, but I don't think it's one that would impact people too negatively. You know, it's not really gonna. You're
not gonna be upset when your gun's ready to fire faster.
No, exactly. So, my next one was there was a spot reduction. So this would be for core mode primarily, and the idea is that it would be like a kind of stealth class. Really, it would reduce the time that you're spotted for ever so slightly. So it doesn't prevent you from being spotted. It just will take you off of that spot slightly quicker. So perhaps it will literally only stay on you for 1.5 seconds. So, you know, the enemy team, they're still going to see you. They're still going to know you're in the area, but they're just going to lose sight of you slightly more quickly. And I think that would be passive enough. It's not going to impact anyone's game as such, but it is going to be beneficial to you. And it's not so overpowered that it's going to impact the enemy team very negatively.
Yeah, no, I like that one a lot. It's something that I would probably end up using much more in big open maps and much less in like tighter urban maps. So I like perks like that aren't so good that you would want to use them in every situation, but are good enough that they would be very good for specific scenarios.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, for example, if you often get on rush maps is the main thing, I think, when you think about this kind of thing, where the first base perhaps is quite easy to run over or very difficult, but either way it's quite upfront. You know, you don't have anywhere to hide or flank. You've got literally just got to get in there. But often the second base can be a bit more difficult. You've got to find routes around, and maybe that's the time you would change out to this class when you want to be a little bit more stealthy. You perhaps want to be the flanking squad, whilst everyone else is fighting up front. You want to make your move around the side, and it could just give you that little benefit.
Okay, so my next perk idea was for quiet movement. A lot of games have this also, but basically when you run around, you make a lot of noise. Enemies can hear this noise. They can basically, if you're listening closely enough, you can anticipate exactly when somebody's going to come around a corner and get your weapon ready to shoot, potentially hit them the second they breach that corner just by listening to their footsteps. So if you had this perk equipped, that would get rid of your footsteps. Now, that could be useful. Some maps are a bit more chaotic. There's so much fighting going on in firefights that it makes it almost impossible to hear footsteps. So it could be potentially evolved into also maybe quiet shout-outs, like when you throw ammo or put
Yeah.
down a med pack, instead of your soldier yelling something like, here's some ammo for you, and then the entire enemy team hearing that.
Yeah.
You could muffle that sound. So that could be an addition to that perk.
I would say like whispers if he's in a library. So, dude,
Here's some ammo.
Dude. No, it would be a good idea, but I think, like we're talking about with these, there is such a danger to for them to become overpowered, and it's really difficult. I think people often don't think about it enough when they start throwing suggestions, or they go, I've got a great idea, we could do this. It's very, very difficult. You really have to think of the logistics and how it's going to fit into the game. But your quiet movement one, you're right. Okay, if you're on, say, Metro and you're trying to get through those tunnels, it's not going to help much when people are firing LMGs and rockets down the corridor. However, on a map like, for example, Zeba Tower, if you're doing Conquest Domination, something like that, those corridors echo massively, and often I find myself sitting on a base there and I'm listening. Everyone else is perhaps on the other side of the map, and because of the echo on that map, you'll hear people coming from all around you very, very easily, and it can really, even if you don't know exactly where they are, you'll be like, oh wow, there's someone here. You'll get ready for them, you know. So a perk like that would give you the edge when you're trying to cap a base against a defender.
All right, so in conclusion, I really like the idea of perk stacking and some of these new perks that we were just messing around with. Obviously, we won't be seeing any of this stuff in Battlefield 3, but we can always hope that some of this stuff might pop up in Battlefield 4. And if you guys have any interesting ideas out there for future perks or something like that, leave them in the comments below, or try and get the devs aware of this stuff. See if we can actually get these ideas implemented in Battlefield 4 if you like them. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. This is Luetin and Levelcap signing off.